Well, here we are. It is Wednesday afternoon. Hard to believe it got here this quick. Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. Still hasn't rained. Drought conditions, almost like every time I think of that, right? We've been about 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks without measurable rain. I think about Elijah prayed that it would not rain, and it rained not upon the earth the space of 3.5 years. 3.5 years, no rain. How crazy is that? How desperate people must have got. How sacred and scarce water became. So they say there's a possibility that we might get some Sunday evening into Monday. We'll see, but there's not any in the long range forecast. Everything's turning brown. Anyway, I hope that you're doing well. I hope that life is treating you good. Here we are on Wednesday, September the 17th, and I thought, I could be wrong, thought we had a great discussion on Sunday about what we speak out loud. And I challenged you to really focus in on what you say out loud. Are you saying things negatively? Or are you saying things positively? When you're speaking about someone, are you saying things in a positive, edifying terms, or are you being degrading and disinterested and despondent? So before we get into our lesson, let me make you aware of a couple things for those of you that are with us here in Salem, Ohio, where today, right now, it is, according to my computer, it's 73 and sunny. I have 2 remaining soccer games left for my season with my little kids, my little players. They are 5 and 6 and 7. Well, most of them are 5 or 6, really. I don't have any 7-year-olds. No, I take that back. I have 1, but I also have several kids on my team that are in need of some special attention and are dealing with emotional issues and anxiety and those kinds of things. So it's always great for me to spend about an hour with them a couple times a week because it reminds me and teaches me about patience. Yeah. And how lucky we are and those kinds of things. So I have that this evening, and then I have one on Saturday, and we're done Saturday. I have a wedding to do Saturday afternoon, and we are excited and hopeful for that. It always amazes me how much work goes into 25 minutes, right? But all in all, we are hoping that it goes well, and I hope all goes well and all that. A couple of announcements. Doug and Kathy are going to be traveling. We hope that they have a great trip. And they're going to be out for a week or so. I hope that they do. They both worked really hard in their lifetime and took care of a lot of people and are still continuing to do that. And they're going to sneak away. And I don't know how much sneaking they're going to do, but they're going away. We hope that they have a wonderful time as well. And we hope that all goes well with them. Don't forget about Sister Phyllis. Be mindful of her. Keep her in your thoughts and prayers. Don't forget about Tim and Pat. Some interesting news, and I'm just going to share it with you. As you know, Tim is directly related to our family. Tim and Pat. Tim's put his house up for sale, and they're going to go back. He's going to go back, and she's going to go with him. They're going to go back to the farm and down back from where Sharon was raised and where they're from. And we're going to miss them when they go. I told him I hope he never sells the house and can't get away, but he's a great guy with a great heart and has been through a lot. And we're grateful for him and and Pat as well. So please be mindful. Again, it's good to see Susie, that she was able to be with us. Hope Brandon's having a great time. I don't know if he's still in Vegas. We won't know. We won't know because what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. Hope Adam's feeling better. He wasn't feeling good on over the weekend. He went out to a football game with Dylan, and then Dylan came back looking great, and Adam AWOL. Actually, I think he came back with an ear infection, I think is what I heard. So we hope that he's feeling better and all's going well for him. I am allergied up. Sunday afternoon, we went to watch Nathan play, and he won. And while I was standing out there, all of a sudden the allergy symptoms, dry, raspy, craspy throat, and my eyes got all watery. So I've been taking an allergy medicine, and I have my moments, but I seem to be doing okay. And the week's progressing and going well for us as well. Got to see Amy, I think, a couple times, and got to see Matt and got to see Matt's parents. It was good to see them and visit with them for a couple minutes. Got to spend some time with Vicki, and I appreciate Vicki very much. She was checking on me and my well-being, and that means a lot to me, and I appreciate seeing her as well. And we got to spend some time with some others, got to spend some time with the kids this past weekend, and so all is well. I hope all is well for you as well. Don't let me forget to mention that Sam got married last month. Time's going by fast. Sam got married, in case you didn't know. Anyway, Sam got married and out of state, and they're coming back this weekend. If you're free and available, 4:00, I think, at Salem Hills Golf Course. You can go by and visit with them if you get the chance. Be mindful of that. I also mentioned to you that our friends, and she had an emergency C-section with twins at 25 or 26 weeks. Believe it or not, the babies are doing well. Weights weigh about 2 pounds apiece, and all is going well for them at this point. So we're grateful and appreciative for not only God hearing our prayers, but also the technology in medicine and how things that were virtually impossible years ago are now becoming common practice. So we're grateful for them, and we ask that you continue to remember them. Great to see Butch and Ruth, and Ruth finally stepped up and made it public on Sunday, if you heard, when she whispered that she loved me. And so, and I know if she's listening now, she's getting a little red and embarrassed, but that's okay. We're finally out, right? And so Ruth has been a inspiration for me for all my years here, and I love you too, Ruth, and I appreciate what you do. So we're glad all of you are with us. Let me spend a couple minutes with you today. We were talking about the miracles. We were talking about, the miracles, and they were miracles, but the plagues that were put onto the Egyptians. And I challenged you last week. I gave you the ending before I gave you the beginning. And I'm trying something different with some of my students. I'm making them right now. They're doing research, a statistical analysis research class, and I'm making them write the ending before the beginning as to what they think they're going to find, and if not, why not? And which is, so I gave you the ending. Now I want to go back and look. We have all probably at some point in time in our life seen the 10 Commandments. It's been on TV, man, 50 plus years, I think, somewhere along in there. It's been out a long time. And wasn't Yul Brynner Pharaoh? Charlton Heston was Moses, right? And we saw those. And so we know a little bit about the plagues. And we read the plagues, but there's things that are inside those stories that we don't know about. And so I wanted to look for just a minute with you and show you two. We're going to look at the first one, and then we're going to look at the ninth one, 1 and 9. One is the plague of blood. That's the first one that comes upon them. And the second one is the plague of darkness, which comes upon them much later on. Remember the story. So here's the context. Moses has asked Pharaoh to let the people go. He will not. He's holding on to, if you think about it from an economic standpoint, he's holding on to free labor. He's holding on to a ton of people, right? As we looked at several weeks ago, it could be 750,000 people, right? Depending upon who your numbering system is. If you look in numbers, whenever they cross over, and there's a ton, multitudes of people. He's losing his labor force. He's losing his workforce. They've been slaves. They've been held in captivity, or they've been in Egypt for over 400 years. And he's losing all of that. And so Moses says, let him go. Pharaoh says yes. Then he changes his mind. So God, interestingly enough, because God gets his will done, he's going to intervene. And whenever he intervenes, he tries a myriad of ways to get their attention, to remind them that he's in charge. I share that with you only for this reason. And I challenge you, right? And I realize I'm always giving you challenges, always. I do the same thing with my students. Maybe that's the teacher in me, and I'm teaching you through that. But if God used things in their lives to try to get them to realize who he was and what he stood for, and his love and his grace, and that he is in charge, is it possible that he does the same thing in your life? You know, the New Testament says that God chastens and disciplines those that he loves. He corrects them in a myriad of ways. And sometimes I think, as we talked about Sunday, in our spirit of not being divisive, or in our spirit of exclusion instead of inclusion, we limit what God's capable of doing because we don't want it to sound like too miraculous or too supernatural or whatever. But does God, so I guess the question is, does God do things in your life to remind you that he is who he is? And automatically you thought negative, but I think positive. You see glass half full, I see glass half empty, right? And so here's an example. Isn't the birth of a child a reaffirmation of God's love for us? Isn't answered prayers a reaffirmation of God's love for us? God reminding us who he is. And sometimes we forget about that God's in control. I think that whenever you read the book of Job, you find out that Job is questioning whether or not God's in control. And God says to him, where were you when I did A? Where were you when I did B? Where were you when I did C? Where were you when I did this and this and this and this and this and this and this? And Job realizes that God is in control and he can do all things as he pleases. I've often said that in the essence of time, as far as it pertains to everybody in the world, there are 6 billion people in the world, depending upon the census data that you look at. God really doesn't need me. He really doesn't need me in the big sense. The world, whenever my time on this earth is done, the world's going to continue to exist until God determines that it's over. I am one of 6 billion. Now, having said that, I realize that God loves me. He has a special place for me in his heart, and he longs for me to be with him. And they built a mansion for me, and he has grace and mercy, and he forgives me. So don't misconstrue this. But what I'm saying to you is, in the scheme of the world, me not being in the world, God's okay, right? He really doesn't need me in that aspect. But you know what? I desperately need him. I desperately need him in my world. And I need him to be there for me and to send the Holy Spirit to comfort me, guide me, and direct me. So God wants to remind them of his power. He does two interesting things. And by the way, if you just read the account, you miss some of this. And we miss sometimes the connection. We go, oh, that's cool. But we miss the significance of it. So the first one is the plague of blood. In Exodus 7, verses 14 through 24, God commands Moses and Aaron to go down to the Nile. And when he goes down to the Nile, strike the Nile with Aaron's staff. Hit the water with Aaron's staff. And when you do, the Nile River becomes blood. The whole river becomes blood. Now, here's the impact of that, right? If you think about it, all the fish in the Nile die. And it doesn't take long before they're stinking. They're rotting, right? And by the way, if you've never smelled a rotten fish on the bank, man, you can smell it a mile away. The crabs haven't got it. But the fish die. Now, more importantly than that, the Egyptians couldn't drink the water out of the Nile. The Nile was their lifeline. It was their source of life. And they had to go get fresh water from somewhere else. Not only that, but if he kills everything in the Nile, it's going to take some time for the Nile to come back. Now, because the Nile was the center point of their life and the water was the center point of their life, they had a god for that. His name was Hapi, Hapi, Happy, or depending upon how you say it, Hapi. And so whenever God says, hey, strike the Nile, not only was it, did it affect Israel's economy and their daily survival and their existence, if you think about it, all of a sudden they have no water, right? And no food from the Nile, no fish, no those kinds of things, whatever it was they were taking out. Not only did it do that, but it also attacked their spiritual life. Now, hold that, okay? Hold that one, because the next one, and I try to pair these two together. The 9th plague is the plague of darkness. And the plague of darkness, we get that in Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 through 29. 21 through 29, right? In that particular case, remember, Pharaoh says, okay, I'll let them go. And then the Nile goes back to being normal. And he says, I changed my mind. I'm not going to do it, which is symbolic sometimes of us. Yeah, I'm going to do this, but then we get an excuse and a reason not to. But in this particular case, God tells Moses again, by the way, stretch out your hand toward heaven, and everything on Egypt becomes completely dark. Utter darkness, completely dark, so that no one could see. Okay. I was reading earlier, I don't know if you've ever heard the term London fog. Whenever London was burning coal during some winters in the 30s and 40s, I think it was 30s, 40s, may have been the 20s. The soot and the ashes would get so thick in the clouds that the sun never shined, and you couldn't see in front of your face. And then it got even worse because it would rain, and then you would have sulfuric acid, and people would die. But that's where that term London fog comes from. It was so thick that the people couldn't see in front of them. This is symbolic of that. It was so dark that they could not see how to move around and to get from point A to point B. Now, as that's happening, if I'm not mistaken, you can look, this is a challenge look, but I think the children of Israel had light. I think they could see. I think they had light, which when it shows us, and the reason I say that is because the darkness, by the way, they had because they were where they were, they had a God for the sun. Their God for the sun. And their God for the sun, who they worship, remember, they are, other than Japan being the land of the rising sun, they had some real issues. I was in Japan, which is AKA the land of the rising sun. And I find that pretty interesting because the God for the sun is called Ra, R-A. So not only did God get their, number one, water, but now he gets their light. And I think that there's some symbolism behind that, right? Darkness, Egyptians, children of Israel, light. God, light. Satan, dark. God's children, righteousness, light. Sin, dark. And that's going to become a theme throughout the scriptures as we move forward, right? He reminds us in Matthew 5 that as the world gets dark, that we are the light of the world. And I shared that with somebody earlier today, as a matter of fact, that if the world's getting dark, and it is, all the things that are happening, right? The shootings and the assassinations and the terrorism and theft and the waste and the riots, all those things, seem to be more frequent. That's dark. Think what happens if God's children are positive, talking about the goodness and grace of God, serving others, ministering to others. Look at the contrast. That's why Jesus says, you're the light of the world. Let your light shine before men that they might see the good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So the first plague, so the plague of darkness, by the way, shows us and reminds us that God has sovereignty over the creation. And not only that, but the God of sun was a fake. What is interesting is that it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time for them to be in complete darkness, that it changes everything, AKA it's dark for 3 days, complete darkness for 3 days. And so Egypt's in darkness, children of Israel are in light. There's an application for us, right? And that is this. Darkness can represent, and sin, if sin, also known as sin in scriptures. I know I just use for some reason I'm using AKA a lot. Also, darkness represents in scriptures confusion, fear, despair, sin. That's what happens whenever God's not the light, when the light is not part of our world. So the first plague attacks the foundation of Egypt, and that is their physical life, water, food, economy. The ninth plague, the darkness, the ninth plague is symbolic of affecting their spirituality. So in this particular case, with just these two plagues, we see God's authority over both physical and spiritual things, right? And that they have spiritual meaning. So as I read that, I think about what are the connections, right? And are there connections? And what's the symbolic meaning of that, right? How do I make an application of that in my life? And I think that the answer is, do you have gods that you worship at the expense of your relationship with Christ? And are they controlling your segments of your life? And if so, God says, I have the power. I have the power to overcome them. But he only does that if we ask him to. I think he reminds us. I'll give you one example, and then I'll wrap this up for you. I keep thinking about this one, and Doug and I had a brief but very good conversation on Sunday. You know, and I've talked about this before, but it's really been kind of poignant. Or we were talking about, as we get older, our mortality moves farther to the front, right? How long do we have? What's our calling in life? What does he have in store for us? What do we have in store for ourselves? And then there's other questions like what comes next? Or, you know, I tell people in personal conversations that my dad always was excited and ready to go to heaven, right? He really, really, really was. He suffered a lot physically here on earth, right? And he rested and assured of heaven. And he believed that God had saved him, and that he was saved by faith through grace, and that God had forgiven him. But my dad still lived in fear of the dying. He still lived in the fear of dying. My dad always prayed, may we go peacefully and quietly into the waiting arms of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And he did in exactly that way. But even whenever my last conversations with him, he acknowledged that he was scared, afraid. And I don't think that he was afraid of what came next. I think he was afraid of the process, how death was going to happen and what was going to occur to him. He was always worried about being a burden to others. And you know, and thus he prayed, may we go peacefully and quietly. He was very much, and by the way, he did. And it went, it all depends on how you look at it. It was about a 2-3 day process, but my dad had kidney failure and went into a coma, and then we did palliative care, and he passed away about 2 days later. But again, he went peacefully and quietly. But whenever we think about our mortality, David says to us, and here's the connection that I had with Doug, I think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And I think Doug and I are on the same page with this. You don't know. David teaches us, here's an example, teach us to number our days. Teach us to recognize that we don't have a whole, that in, as it pertains to eternity, we don't have a whole lot of time on this earth. We really don't. Our days are shortened. Teach us to recognize and number and know that we're not here forever. It said that Satan or man has put eternity in our hearts. We believe we're going to live forever. So the question that I have for you, and I just want you to think about this, and then I'm done. I could go on and on because this has been on my mind a lot recently. If God teaches us to number our days, David says, teach us how to number our days. Teach us to recognize that life is, in essence, short. How does he do that? How does he teach us? I think he teaches us by taking life away, allowing nature to run its course. People die suddenly. You know, I talked to my sister the other day, I think yesterday, may have been the day before. No, it was yesterday morning. She called me on Monday and I didn't call her back. But anyway, it was yesterday. And I said to her, hey, your boy, the guy that you were in love with for most of your life, has died. Robert Redford died, in case you didn't know that. Robert Redford died, fell asleep at 89 years of age, right? And lived a great life, rich man, had lots of family and friends and made an impact in very different ways, especially in environmental causes. But he died, right? And so we have him who dies at 89, and then we have somebody that tragically gets shot, like our guy, the guy last week in Utah. And we're talking about him, but we also should be talking about the girl who died, who got shot by the crazy guy on the bus in Charlotte, or the students that got shot in Minnesota, or anybody else. On average, believe it or not, there are about 380 people that die in Ohio every single day. All of them leave behind family, loved ones, co-workers, careers, businesses. Many, if not all of them, made some kind of impact, right? Some old, some young, some middle-aged. Teach us to number our days. Remind us that you're in charge. And I think he does that by reminding us about the frailty of the corruptible. Corinthians says that we have to go from corruptible and incorruptible. We have to go from mortal into immortal. And we do that whenever we become God's children. So I encourage you to think about that. Think about ways in which God reminds you that he is God. Reminds you that he is God. And so I hope that you have a wonderful evening. I hope that all goes well for you. We look forward to seeing you Sunday. If you're with us Sunday morning for Bible study, we're in Hey Jude. We're going to look at Jude. A lot of stuff in there. We're going to look at Jude, which is only 25 verses, but it might take us who knows how long, because there's a lot of interesting discussion in there about angels, this, that. And then in the next hour, I think we're going to try to wrap up that discussion about, right, keeping, Paul tells us to keep all our thoughts captive. Keep all your thoughts captive. And we're going to talk about that from the standpoint of your day. We're going to make a practical lesson. Invite others to watch. Invite others to come. Whatever works best. But we are here to help and to assist and to serve. If we can be of anything for you, by all means, please let us know. Oh, and it was great to see Brock. He had been not feeling well, and we were glad to see him on Sunday as well. So we're glad to see you. We hope that you have a wonderful evening, and go in peace. We will talk with you later on. Until then, adios, amigos.